All right, so it looks like we're tackling mental health crises this time.
Yeah, looks like it.
A whole stack of articles here about supporting someone through one of those.
Practical guides, personal perspectives.
I get the feeling you're looking for more than just theory with this one, right? Like you want to actually walk away knowing what to do.
Absolutely. And I think these sources are perfect for that.
Yeah, we've got Mind and AMI, the Mental Health Foundation.
Oh, nice. So we've got both UK and US perspectives on this.
And don't forget that do's and don'ts article. That's from like a personal perspective.
Oh, right. Yeah. I always love seeing what resonates most with people who've actually been there.
Me too.
Yeah.
And the range is impressive. Like
Yeah.
we're talking about communication techniques, spotting the signs, setting boundaries.
Even navigating emergency situations.
Yeah, I'm already scribbling notes like crazy.
What I think is really cool is how many of these sources go beyond just saying what to do and really get into why it matters. You know, like that deeper understanding can make the difference between feeling totally helpless and actually being able to offer, meaningful support.
Okay, so let's zoom out for a sec and look at the big picture. The Mental Health Foundation makes this point that I thought was super important. They say you don't always need a diagnosis to offer support.
Oh, that's so true.
Like sometimes just recognizing that someone's struggling is enough.
Yeah, I think so often people hesitate to act because they feel like they need to be experts or have the right label for what someone's going through.
Right.
But really, it's just about seeing that someone isn't themselves and that they might need a little extra care.
Yeah, no medical degree required for basic human decency,
Absolutely.
right? But NAMI kind of throws a curveball here. They don't sugarcoat how serious a mental health crisis can be.
Oh, right.
They're talking about like self-harm, panic attacks, suicidal thoughts, even legal trouble because of mental health struggle.
Wow.
This is way beyond just having a bad day.
Yeah, and I think that intensity is often what makes people freeze up
Yeah.
or just don't know what to do.
Right. But here's where things get really fascinating. Futures Recovery Healthcare actually talks about breakdowns as potential turning points.
Whoa. Okay.
They even quote someone who says it was like hitting rock bottom. But that's what forced them to build a new, stronger foundation.
Hold on. I need to process that for a sec.
Yeah.
So it's not all doom and gloom.
Exactly. It's a chance for growth, for confronting things that might have been festering for years.
Yeah.
And as a supporter, you can be part of that rebuilding process. I think that's really powerful.
Okay. I'm getting chills already, and we haven't even gotten to the communication part yet.
Right.
But that's obviously key. Like, how do we actually talk to someone going through this? Mine suggests starting simple. Just ask how they're doing.
Yeah, it seems so basic.
Right.
But think about it from their perspective. Maybe they haven't felt like anyone cared to ask, or they've been putting on a brave face. Just that open invitation to talk without pressure can be so validating.
But what if they don't want to talk? Or they just clam up halfway through?
Right. The Mental Health Foundation gives these 8 tips for active listening, and they're pretty specific, which I love.
Oh, cool.
Things like finding a distraction-free space, letting the person set the pace. It feels almost like creating a ritual, not just a conversation.
Yeah, it's about creating a space where you can both be fully present,
Yeah.
mentally and emotionally.
Yeah.
Not just hearing the words, but really absorbing what's being said and what's not being said.
Right, because sometimes it's the body language or the tone of voice that tells the real story.
Absolutely.
NAMI even quotes a therapist who says, sometimes just listening can be immensely helpful. I love that.
Oh, me too.
It reminds you that you don't need to have all the answers, just a genuine willingness to be there.
Yeah, totally. But remember, communication goes both ways.
Right.
The do's and don'ts piece is really big on setting expectations right from the start.
Mm-hmm.
Like, are you expecting them to be actively seeking therapy? Do they have a plan if things escalate? Having those conversations up front, even if they're tough, can prevent so much resentment and misunderstanding later on.
Whoa, okay. That's a bit of a reality check. It's not all gentle listening and holding space, huh?
Right.
Sometimes we need to lay out what we need as supporters, too.
Exactly. And that leads to a really interesting question, I think, which we'll explore more as we go.
Yeah.
How do we balance supporting someone with taking care of ourselves?
Ooh.
Because, you can't pour from an empty cup.
Oh, man, that's going to be key. I'm already thinking about all the times I've stretched myself thin, trying to be the perfect friend or the perfect family member.
Right.
Okay, before we go down that rabbit hole, what's really stood out to you so far in these sources?
Honestly, it's the emphasis on WRAP plans.
WRAP plans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a bit more technical maybe, but the idea of having a plan in place before a crisis hits,
Okay.
something co-created with the person you're supporting, it's proactive, it's empowering. I think is brilliant.
Okay, now I'm even more intrigued. What exactly is a RAP plan?
Yeah.
And how do we even bring that up in conversation?
Right.
I guess that's for part 2, huh?
You got it. We'll unpack all that next time. But for now, let's just let this idea sink in. Mental health support isn't just about reacting when things are bad.
Okay.
It can be about building resilience, laying the groundwork for better days ahead.
I like the sound of that a lot. All right, listeners, grab a drink, take a deep breath. We're going deep on EE plans next. Okay. Brains recharged, ready for round 2. Last time we left off with this whole WRAP plan thing. I'm dying to know more. Like, what exactly are they?
Yeah.
And how do they actually work in practice, when it comes to supporting someone through a crisis?
Okay, so WRAP stands for Wellness Recovery Action Plan.
Okay.
Think of it as like a personalized roadmap for staying well even when things get tough. And the best part is it's not something you impose on someone. It's a collaborative process.
Okay, I'm already picturing those cheesy stock photos, road to recovery with a sunset.
Right.
But I'm guessing this is a bit more nuanced than that, right?
Definitely. It's about understanding what triggers a person's distress, what their early warning signs are, and then brainstorming strategies for coping. It could be anything from journaling to exercise to calling a friend, whatever works for them.
Okay, so it's personalized. But where do these sources even mention WRAP plans? I don't remember seeing that word specifically.
Yeah, they don't use the term explicitly, but a lot of the advice points in that direction.
Oh, okay.
Like when GoodRx talks about creating a safe environment, that's a key part of a RAP plan.
I see.
Identifying what makes someone feel safe and secure and building that into their daily routine.
Oh, I see. So it's like taking those general tips and making them super concrete, tailored to the individual.
Exactly.
And turning points, end of warning signs, those could be building blocks for a RAP plan too, right?
Totally.
They talk about withdrawal changes in sleep patterns, even physical things like nausea or trembling.
Yep, all of that.
Okay, so that's where the technical part comes in, right?
Yeah, a good RAP plan will include specific things to look out for, so you're not just relying on vague feelings.
Right.
It's about empowering both the person struggling and their support network to recognize when things are heading south.
Okay. I'm starting to get the proactive angle you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Instead of waiting for a full-blown crisis, you're essentially creating a system for catching things early on.
Right.
But how does that actually play out in real life? Let's say someone's having a panic attack. Does their RAP plan just magically make it disappear?
Not magically, no. But it can provide a framework for action.
Okay.
Remember those active listening tips from the Mental Health Foundation?
Yeah.
Those could be built right into a RAP plan.
Yeah.
So instead of fumbling in the heat of the moment, you already know, okay, we need to find a quiet space. I need to focus on validating their feelings, not trying to fix things.
Whoa, that takes a lot of pressure off, right?
Totally.
Instead of feeling like you have to be this perfect therapist, you're just following the steps that they themselves have identified as helpful.
Exactly. And that's where the empowerment comes in.
Yeah.
It's not about you taking control. It's about working with them to navigate the tough stuff.
All right, I'm sold on WRAP plans, but I have to admit, bringing that up in conversation feels kind of intimidating.
Oh, yeah, I get that.
How do you even start that conversation? Hey, want to make a plan for when you're freaking out? Doesn't exactly sound inviting.
Right. You need some finesse.
Yeah.
But again, a lot of the communication advice we've talked about can be applied here.
Okay.
Remember what mine said about simply asking how they're doing. That could be a starting point. Then as the conversation unfolds, you can gently introduce the idea of planning for tough times.
Okay, so it's more about planting the seed, not dropping a whole instruction manual on them.
Exactly. You might say something like, I'm committed to supporting you, and I was wondering if there are specific things that help when you're feeling anxious or overwhelmed.
Right.
Then you can build from there.
What if they're resistant, though?
Yeah.
The do's and don'ts article is pretty clear about respecting boundaries. So how do we balance that with encouraging them to create a plan?
It's tricky. Sometimes the best thing you can do is model the behavior. Share your own coping strategies. Talk about times when you've struggled and what helped you get through. That can create an opening for them to share their own experiences.
So lead by example. Show them it's okay to be vulnerable and proactive about mental health.
Exactly.
I like that.
And remember, creating a RAP plan isn't a one-time thing.
Right.
It's an ongoing process.
Yeah.
You revisit it, revise it as needed. As the relationship evolves, as the person's needs change, the plan adapts. It's about being flexible, not rigid.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's not about locking them into some strict system. It's about giving them tools to take ownership of their own well-being.
Right.
But let's be real, sometimes things escalate, right? What
Mhm.
about those emergency situations where a drop plan maybe isn't enough?
Right.
The do's and don'ts article was pretty clear that calling 911 should be a last resort.
Yeah, and that's where things get really tricky. We have to remember that involving law enforcement can be really traumatic for someone experiencing a mental health crisis, especially if they're not in immediate danger of harming themselves or others.
Right. The article talked about harm reduction tips, if 911 is called.
Right.
But it really emphasized that voluntary admission to a mental health facility is the safer option whenever possible.
Yeah, for sure.
But how do we even navigate that? Is it like, hey, you want to check yourself in?
It's definitely not that simple.
Mm.
It often requires collaboration with other people in their support network,
Okay.
maybe their therapist if they have one, or a trusted family member.
Right.
The key is to approach it from a place of care and concern, not coercion.
Okay, so less intervention and more, we're all in this together.
Exactly.
But what if they're refusing help? Like point blank.
That's where those hotlines we talked about come in.
Right.
Futures Recovery Healthcare really emphasized the importance of the 9888 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. It's available 24/7 in the U.S.,
Right.
and they can connect people to local crisis centers and provide immediate support.
And for our UK listeners, we mentioned the Samaritans and the Mindfully.
Yeah, those are both great resources, too.
I'm realizing that having those numbers readily available, not just for the person struggling, but for ourselves as supporters, is like crucial.
Totally.
It's like having a lifeline when you feel like you're drowning.
And that brings us right back to that question of self-care.
Oh, right.
We've talked so much about supporting them, but what about supporting ourselves through this process?
Right, because let's be honest, being there for someone going through a mental health crisis, it's exhausting.
It is.
It's draining. You start to question everything. Am I doing enough? Am I doing too much? Am I making things worse?
Totally normal to feel that way. And that's exactly why an AMI says you don't need to do this alone.
Yeah.
It's okay to reach out to other people in their support system, or even call a hotline yourself for advice.
Yeah.
You're not a superhero, and trying to be one will only lead to burnout.
Okay, permission to not be a superhero officially granted. But how do we actually set those boundaries? The do's and don'ts article mentioned TCT, timing, accountability, compassion, and transparency as a framework.
Yeah.
But honestly, that just sounds like a bunch of corporate buzzwords to me.
It's more than buzzwords, I promise.
Yeah.
Think about it like this. Timing. Are you choosing the right time to have a difficult conversation?
Okay.
Are you both calm and receptive? Accountability. Are you holding yourself and the other person accountable for your actions and commitments? Compassion. Are you approaching the situation with empathy and understanding for both them and for yourself?
Okay, that's starting to make more sense. And what was the last one?
Transparency.
Right.
Being upfront about your needs and limitations.
Yeah.
Saying things like, I'm here for you, but I also need to take care of myself. I can't be available 24/7, but I promise to check in with you tomorrow.
Whoa, okay, that's a game changer. It's not selfish. It's actually essential for being a sustainable source of support.
Exactly.
Mind also talked about seeking support for ourselves as caregivers, even mentioning potential social care resources.
All right. And Carers UK was another one they highlighted.
Oh, yeah.
It's a reminder that this deep dive isn't just about one person. It's about the whole ecosystem of support.
Okay, I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed, but in a good way. We've covered so much WRAP plans, navigating emergency situations, taking care of ourselves.
It's a lot.
But how does this all, tie together? What's the big takeaway here?
I think it's about shifting our perspective from reaction to prevention.
Hmm.
Instead of waiting for a crisis to hit, we can be proactive, build resilience, and create a culture where mental health is discussed openly and honestly.
So it's not just about putting out fires. It's about building fire-resistant homes in the first place.
Exactly. And that starts with open communication, with normalizing conversations about mental health, with having those potentially awkward but so important conversations about lap plans, boundaries, and self-care before things reach a breaking point.
I'm getting chills again. This feels like a call to action.
It is.
Not just for people going through a crisis, but for all of us?
It is. It's about recognizing that we all have mental health, just like we have physical health.
Yes.
And just like we take care of our bodies,
Yeah.
we need to take care of our minds.
Right. I think we need to pause here for a second and let that sink in.
Yeah.
This is getting deep, folks, but in the best possible way.
Right.
We'll be back in a flash with some final thoughts to help you process all this amazing information. Deep breaths, everyone. We just covered like a ton of stuff from raps, emergency resources, to the whole self-care thing, like how to actually take care of yourself when you're supporting someone else.
Yeah, that's a lot.
My brain is like buzzing. How are you holding up?
I'm with you. It's dense stuff. But that's what makes these deep dives so great, right?
Right.
We're not just skimming the surface here.
Yeah.
We're really getting into the nitty-gritty of supporting someone through a mental health crisis.
And what's really hitting me is that we don't have to wait till things are totally falling apart to start having these conversations.
Oh, for sure.
We can be proactive, not just reactive.
Remember that quote from Futures Recovery Healthcare? How someone described their breakdown as hitting rock bottom, but that's what let them build a stronger foundation.
Yeah.
Imagine if we could help people lay that foundation before the earthquake hits.
Whoa. Okay, metaphor officially stolen.
Go for it.
I love that. But how do we actually do that? It's easy to say be proactive, but what does that look like in real life?
Well, think about those communication tips from Mind and the Mental Health Foundation.
Right.
Just asking someone how they're really doing, creating that safe space for them to open up. That's a form of prevention right there.
Right. Because it's normalizing the conversation, showing them it's okay to not be okay. It's not waiting for them to reach out. It's extending a hand before they even realize they're slipping.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not just about talking. It's about modeling healthy behaviors ourselves.
Yeah.
Sharing our own coping strategies, being open about times when we've struggled.
Right.
That can be so powerful, especially for younger people who might be figuring out how to deal with their own mental health stuff.
It's like we're not just giving advice. We're showing them that it's okay to be vulnerable, to ask for help. And that kind of brings us back to WRAP plans.
Yeah.
The Do's and Don'ts article didn't use the term specifically, but a lot of the advice felt like it was pointing in that direction.
Totally. Think about it. Setting clear boundaries, having those tough conversations about expectations before things explode. Those are all part of a good WRAP plan. It's not just for the person struggling, it's for the whole support system.
So it's like we're creating a shared roadmap, right. A set of guidelines for how to navigate those rough waters together.
Exactly.
But let's be real, sometimes a roadmap isn't enough.
Right.
What about those times when things escalate quickly and we're in like full-blown crisis mode?
That's when having those emergency resources at hand is so important.
Right.
Having that 988 number saved in your phone, knowing who to call in the UK, that can literally save a life.
Yeah.
But even with the best preparation, these situations can still feel really overwhelming.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And that's where that self-care piece comes back in. NEMI's reminder that you don't need to do this alone. That's been stuck in my head ever since we read it.
Me too.
It's okay to reach out for support ourselves, to admit that we're not superhuman.
Now remember, TACT, timing, accountability, compassion, transparency.
Right.
That's not just for dealing with the person in crisis. It's for us too.
Yeah.
Knowing when we need to step back, set a boundary, ask for help.
Okay, so let me get this straight. We're talking about open communication, normalizing mental health conversations, creating WRAP plans, having those emergency resources ready, and taking care of ourselves throughout the whole process. That's a lot.
It is, but it's also incredibly empowering. It's about taking ownership of our mental health, both individually and collectively.
Yeah.
It's about creating a world where asking for help isn't a weakness, but a strength.
I love that. It's like we're shifting the whole script around mental health,
Right.
From shame and secrecy to openness and support.
And that's what's so cool about these deep dives. We're not just absorbing information, we're challenging our own assumptions, expanding our understanding, and hopefully walking away with a new sense of agency and hope.
So to everyone listening, wherever you are in your mental health journey, know that you're not alone.
Yeah.
There are resources, there are people who care, and there is hope. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is just start the conversation.
Beautifully said. And remember, taking care of yourself isn't selfish. It's essential. You can't pour from an empty cup, so fill yours up first.
I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about today.
For sure.
They've got practical tips, tons of resources, and a whole new way of looking at mental health support. It's been a journey, and I'm so glad we had you along for the ride.
My pleasure. Until next time, folks, keep those conversations going. The world needs your empathy, your vulnerability, and your willingness to support each other through thick and thin.
And that's a wrap on another deep dive. We'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration of all things knowledge and insights. Stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay kind to yourselves and each other.